Okay. Well, regular Open Space Commission. This meeting brings with Act currently under the State Emergency Services Act, the governor's emergency declaration related to COVID-19 and the governor's executive order N-2920 issued on March 17th, 2020 that allows attendance by members of the commission, city staff, and the public to participate and conduct the meeting by video conference. Video conference locations are not open to the public. As some attendees may be participating in their first Walnut Creek Pros Commission meeting or their first teleconference meeting, I want to welcome everybody and talk briefly about the public comment process. This portion of the meeting is reserved for comment on items not on the agenda. Under the Brown Act, the commission cannot act on items raised during public communications, but may respond briefly to statements made or questions posed, request clarification, or refer the item to staff. When I open the public comment period, please use the raise hand feature or press 9 if you are connected by audio only, which will alert staff that you have a public comment and you would like to provide. Please wait your turn, and once brought into the meeting, state your name and city of residence for the record. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to make your remarks. To provide a live remote public comment, please join the Zoom video conference meeting. The meeting ID is 969-8724-0111, and the password is 530191. I hope you all had a pen. Should you choose not to provide comments, but would like to view the meeting, you may do so in one of the following ways. We have YouTube Live, Comcast Cable, Channel 28, Rossmore, Channel 26, Wave, Channel 29, AT&T Uverse, Channel 99, or live stream online on the city's website. Thank you for listening. And we will start with the roll.
My pleasure. Commissioner Kearsley?
Here.
Commissioner Davenport?
Here.
Commissioner Weston? Commissioner Weston, can you hear us?
There we go. I had a little trouble unmuting, but I'm here.
Okay. And Vice Chair Oler?
Here.
And Chair Brendan Moran?
Here. Okay, it's time for public communications. This portion of the meeting is reserved for comment on items not on the agenda. Under the Brown Act, the commission cannot act on items raised during public communications, but may respond briefly to statements made or questions posed, request clarification, or refer the item to staff. Do you need me to, should I read the rest of it? I kind of feel like I already did about the raise hand in number 9.
I know we probably don't have any in here. I'll look at it real quick.
Hold on one second.
If we have one,
It looks like right now we don't have any public comment.
should be already open.
Sorry.
Where's the keyboard at? It's over here. It's just the clerks, right? There's no consent calendar, is that true?
Yes, there is.
Is there a consent calendar first?
You want me to do that? No, the
Oh,
communications first.
Okay, I don't, this isn't logging in. I'm gonna try it from my back computer.
Okay.
You know what's over here too? This one. Can I? I'll double check.
It looks at this time that we do not have any public comment, but we're verifying that. So can we take the consent calendar next and then we'll come back to public comment?
Okay. Item 3A is the approval of the minutes of the special meeting of October 21st, 2019. Do I have a motion to approve?
I move we approve the specified meeting notes.
Seconded.
Okay, Commissioner Oler,
Yes.
Commissioner Kearsley,
Yes.
Commissioner Davenport,
Yes.
Commissioner Weston,
Yes.
and Chair Moran.
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously.
Item 3B, approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of December 2nd, 2019. Do I have a motion to approve?
Move
Just
to
to be
approve
clear-
the regular meeting on December 2nd.
Second.
Just to be clear, the item B is the October 21st, 2019 minutes. Oh, no, sorry. Oh, no, sorry. You
That's
did it
right.
right. You did it correct. I have an old. Okay, sorry about that. Commissioner Davenport,
Approved?
Vice Chair Oler,
Approved.
Commissioner Weston,
Approved.
Commissioner Kearsley,
Approved.
and Chair Moran. The motion passes unanimously.
Okay, moving on. Number 4, consideration for the commission chair and vice chair elections. At long last, may I have a motion to approve the chairmanship for Mr. Oler?
Yes, I'd like to motion to nominate Commissioner Oler for the position of chair.
Second?
Okay, Commissioner Kearsley,
Yes.
Commissioner Davenport,
Yes.
Commissioner Weston,
Yes.
and Vice Chair, soon to be Chair, Oler,
Yes.
and Chair Moran.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. So now I think you get to officially or virtually pass the gavel over.
I don't know where you grid are.
Okay. So our next consideration is the vice chair for the coming year. Do I have a motion? Brendan, do I have a motion?
Yes, you do. Art. I nominate Jody Davenport.
Do I have a second?
Second?
So all in favor? I guess we're going to call the roll.
I'll call the roll. Commissioner Moran,
Yes.
Commissioner Kearsley,
Yes.
Commissioner Weston,
Yes.
Commissioner Davenport,
Yes.
and Chair Oler.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously. Congratulations to both of you.
Thank you. Okay, we're moving into our reports on projects, and first up is Parks and Open Space Fiscal Year 2021 update.
Well, good evening, Chair Oler and Commissioners. My name is Mike Vickers, Park and Open Space Manager. Can everybody hear me okay? Yep, perfect. I have a two-part presentation for you tonight. First, I wanted to take a few minutes to share with you what has taken place in the Parks and Open Space divisions over the last several months as it relates to COVID and civil unrest and some of those things. And then I want to move ahead into fiscal year 21 and share with you the details on our staffing levels, upcoming projects. And I've asked one of our senior planners, Janine Cavalli, to share with you an update on where we are with the Your Park, Your Future. I'm sorry, Heather, oh, there it goes. It's coming up now. So Cindy, can you move to the next slide, please? So that was the agenda I just mentioned, and then the next slide, please. Okay, thank you. And I forgot to mention before I jump into this slide, the commissioner action for tonight is just to hear the report and provide feedback at the end of the presentation. So jumping into COVID-19 and civil unrest, as all of you know, the county put out its first round of health orders back in mid-March. And it was at that time the city certainly agreed that it was going to comply with those health orders. The health orders over a period of 2 or 3 weeks, and I may have those dates a little bit off, became more restrictive. There were certainly some gray areas in the beginning. We didn't know how long the pandemic was going to last and to what extent it was going to impact us. It was at that point, Heather Ballinger, Director of Public Works, and I'm sure many of the other directors started meeting with their management teams on a daily basis to discuss the health orders and some of the other challenges that we were going to be faced with. Our number one focus at all of our meetings, and we met every day for about an hour, and we continue to do so to discuss a number of things. But first and foremost, the focus is always on public safety and the safety of our staff. As you know, eventually, I would say it was around by the end of the first week in April, for the most part, everything in terms of park and open space amenities and even public spaces were closed to the public, with exception of trails and restrooms. And as I mentioned, some of these areas were gray. They didn't specifically say we needed to close restrooms. There's a pretty large membership that many of the park staff and the recreation staff that are involved with, which is CPRS, California Park and Recreation. There was a lot of online chatter. We were hearing from different agencies what they were doing as it related to Northern California, Central California, and Southern California. And by far, Northern California was certainly leading the way in terms of restrictions. But it was kind of interesting to see what some of the other cities are doing. A number of cities, even in our county, decided to shut down restrooms. We had a pretty broad discussion about it. I think it even made it to the executive team level on how we were going to address restrooms, and the decision was made at that point to keep them open. We certainly felt that there was a need, and it was within the county guidelines that individuals could get out, go for a hike, take their dog for a walk, actually, get some fresh air, as long as they were practicing social distancing. We wanted to provide them with an opportunity to use a restroom and wash their hands or do whatever they needed to do. So the decision was made to leave the restrooms open. The reason I'm sharing this with you is because we've certainly received a lot of positive and negative feedback dating back to the middle of March as we move forward with these steps and the county orders as they move forward. We took it upon ourselves once we decided to leave the restrooms open that we were going to train our staff in order to protect the public and the staff as a whole on how to disinfect. And so we had our entire staff out what we call frequently touch points. They were getting to the restrooms, they were getting to the benches, bike racks, anything that the public might come in contact with on a regular basis in our parks, in our open space, and even the downtown amenities. So there was a lot that went into it. Public safety, obviously, number one. At some point, we were even wiping down and sanitizing the playgrounds because we didn't know how quickly they were going to reopen. So moving on to budget, as probably many of you know, there was a projected about a $10 million deficit in fiscal year 20. As part of the daily meetings that we were having with Director Ballinger, we were trying to figure out how we were going to do public works portion of that to offset that deficit. And we were looking at capital budget projects. We were looking at current contracts, maintenance service agreements, and what could we do in order to reduce our overall expenditures. And just to give you an example, one of those ideas was to pause on our contract for weed abatement out in the open space and have the parks partner with the parks partner with open space in order to conduct that work. And I'll share a little bit more with you in a little bit. We were also in the process of hiring 5 individuals to backfill several vacant positions, including some retirements that we've had. And unfortunately, due to the deficit, all those positions, well, it was decided at that point that we were going to put a pause on any hiring because we didn't know how long this pandemic was going to happen. So those positions were frozen. So we were down, well, just to back up a minute, in 2012, the Parks and Open Space Division had about 43 employees. And today we have about 28. And that's not the positions. We have about 35 positions, but only about 28 bodies fill those positions at this point. And I'll share more about the staff levels with you in just a minute. Because of those staffing levels, we have now moved into a reactive approach as opposed to a proactive approach. When COVID kicked in March, one of the first guidelines that came out was that we could only focus on essential services. And because of that, our staff was reduced down to 4 days a week for a period of 3 or 4 weeks. And as I mentioned earlier, we decided to take on the weed abatement program and partner the park staff with the open space staff. And so it was 2 days a week, the park staff was in the open space weed abating. Just so you know, we weed abate about 90 to 100 miles of open space trails and property lines. And about 25 to 30 miles of that is done with weed eaters. And so the park staff spent about 2 days a week out in the open space. And then the other 2 days a week, we're taking care of the essential functions within the parks. Now, there was a silver lining to this because the parks weren't being heavily used. And so we were able to keep up with the trash and litter demands. Obviously, we weren't having playground amenities broken down. All the ball fields were still getting mowed every other week, but we weren't having those pressures from the user groups out there. So we were able to handle those essential services. So moving on to communication. As I mentioned, we met on a regular basis. We were communicating quite frequently with the recreation staff on what was taking place and what the programming was going to look like in the future, and picnics and all those types of things. We also emailed and had a lot of communication with our public information officer, Betsy Burkhart, who was vital during this process. I mean, Betsy was helping us with getting information out through Nextdoor, through the city website, all the social media opportunities that we had. In fact, I think most of you know, we had a couple COVID testing sites within our parks. For about a week or 2 weeks, we had one at Heather Farm in the community center. And then that one moved over to Tice Valley Park in the gymnasium there. And Betsy was the go-between the city and the county to help get those set up. Betsy's been very engaged. City manager obviously has been very engaged. We've just at a staff level, we've received 20 to 25 updates. So communication has been flowing very fluently throughout the staff itself. Operation impacts. So signage. When I first got here, I used to hear a lot about signage pollution because we would have signs everywhere. And so we tried to reduce the amount of signage, and now we've probably tripled the amount of signage that's out there in order to educate the public on social distancing. And some of it is just to make sure everybody's, complying, but it feels like is giving people that sense of security that there is a sign out there that they can point to and maybe educate the individual that's hiking by them or riding by them. So there's some benefit there. Hopefully they're using it to police themselves quite a bit. Our playgrounds, restrooms, dog parks, I mean, the signs are literally everywhere, and they're increasing. We get feedback from the community on a daily basis. A lot of it's been educational for us. There are some, I don't want to call them holes, but maybe some things that we overlooked in terms of signage. And they brought that to our attention. We've been able to take care of that. We do all of our signs in-house. The Traffic Operations Center, Carlin and Sebastian have just been stellar. And they're not just dealing with parks and open space, they're dealing with the city as a whole. So a lot of signage out there. Hopefully we can get rid of that here in the coming months. Usage, I think everybody has probably heard or read through some of our weeklies that the open space usage is the numbers are record breaking. Art Janke and Dan Byland have been here for a total of about 35 years, and they have never seen the numbers like we're getting now. We're heading in the direction to get about 1.2 million visitors this year out in the open space. Unfortunately, there's a small percentage of individuals that are exploring areas that are kind of out of bounds. And so we're having some challenges with that. As I mentioned earlier, we're in reactive, not preventative or proactive approach right now. So it's going to be a challenge moving forward. There are trails in areas that have never seen trails before. And we're going to be working through that with the open space committee, and I'll share some of that with you a little bit later. In terms of the parks are very active. However, the usage is not the norm, which is beneficial for us with the staffing levels being as low as they are right now. We hope to be able to hire some positions back in the near future, but next summer is going to be far more, if this pandemic finishes, is behind us as we move into the spring and summer of next year. Next year is going to be even more challenging for us than this year with the users, sports, and the ball fields. There's going to be more pressure in the ball fields, the playgrounds. It's going to be difficult to keep up with the staffing levels that we have. So this reactive approach will likely continue through that process. Essential services, I touched on that a little bit ago. Staff was down to 4 days a week. We were able to keep up with the trash and litter, even though we were only out there 2 days a week. And safety inspections. We do a lot of visual safety inspections along with inspections that we're required to do in our exterior facilities and our equipment. We were able to keep all those up to date. Graffiti. With the civil unrest, there were there were a few people expressing themselves through spray paint, time and time again. A lot of the graffiti couldn't wait till the next day in order to be removed. It needed to be removed as reported, within a few hours. Pretty graphic. Graffiti is still on the uptick. So there's a lot of time and effort that is going into that. We've partnered with East Bay Regional on a lot of our paved trails around here. It's kind of first come, first serve. If you see it, take care of it type of thing, and just report back and forth to one another. So we are partnering. Same thing with Contra Costa Water. We're working together to address some of these situations. Still in line with the unrest, street closures. We've had our parks and open space, our traffic, our division, our mechanics down boarding up City Hall and some of our facilities in the downtown. There were, for a period there, it seemed like every day we were moving pedestrian barricades around and lane closures, working very closely with PD was kind of guiding, they were directing us on where to be setting these barricades up and when to take them down, move them around. It was obviously fluid situation as they started crossing YVR and getting to different areas. We were moving things around. It was hard to predict sometimes which direction they were going to go in. So we had materials all over the city. Contact Us is an app that you can get. It's certainly used quite frequently by the community. They can get on through the city website to provide feedback. We try to get back to the public within 48 hour period. We have been receiving, and I know the same thing goes for rec, dozens of emails on a daily basis about a number of things. We're not always able to get back within that 48-hour limit, but we're doing our best. There's a lot of positive feedback, and there's some constructive feedback as well that we're receiving. In terms of reopening the amenities, I think most of you know that they are starting to reopen. our tennis courts and pickleball courts, some of our soccer camps. I've seen some baseball groups out practicing, along with some lacrosse groups out practicing. So there is some things starting to open up, which is great. Get everybody outside, kind of get a little bit back to normalcy. And even in the downtown, as you've seen, the restaurants and the outdoor dining, Public Works plays a big part of that. It's mostly handled through the engineering staff, but there are maintenance needs that we are involved in on a regular basis in the downtown. So we're excited to see things open, get a little bit back to normal. Fencing, I just wanted to throw that in there so that I didn't forget. With the challenges that we're having at the All Billies Playground, it's been requested by not only PD, but some others that we fence that playground off to the public. And so we are planning this Thursday, hopefully this Thursday. The schedule has changed a couple times because of the contractor, to put a 6-foot temporary chain link fence around the All Abilities Playground. So we'll get some positive and negative feedback about that, but I wanted to let you know in advance. We've got to be able to keep those people out of the playground. It's obviously challenging. PD shows up, we'll have everybody move away from the site, they'll drive away, and it seems like everybody's moving back. So this is the measure we're going to take. So next slide, please, Cindy. So this is kind of moving into this second part of this presentation here, fiscal year 21 operational budget. I believe most of you know this, the funding sources that we use to fund the parks and open space. I just thought I'd jot it down here as a reminder. The general fund funds all of parks, graffiti, and the vast majority of urban forestry, and about 50% of the open space. The other 50% comes from an open space bond, which comes through your property tax. There's some grant funding that we've received in the past. Grant funding is difficult for most of the departments in Walnut Creek. We don't often win those grants. However, we do have some grant funding from Prop 68 that we're currently going to be using. It's in our capital budget. And there are some opportunities that are coming up and have to be applied for in December of this year, in which we will be doing, and I'll be updating you on that those grant funding opportunities as we move forward throughout the year. Dedication program probably shouldn't be in this category. This is a program that the Pros Commission recommended 3 or 4 years ago. As all of you know, our naming policy is pretty restrictive. And so the decision was to put a dedication program out there where someone could get a bench or a tree or a picnic table or something along those lines to recognize a family member or a Walnut Creek resident. We've had 20 to 25 of those so far, so that's been pretty good. Tree in lieu and park in lieu are very similar. If a developer goes into a space, they don't put in enough green space, they need to pay into a park in lieu fund. If they remove a highly protected tree or a number of trees, there's a value tag to that tree, and that funding goes into the tree in lieu fund or tree mitigation fund, and that money is set aside to be used on improving our urban forest. Operations, these are non-personnel operation reductions. So our general operation and maintenance expenses. Overall, in fiscal year 21, the park and open space divisions have a reduction of about $100,000. About 50,000 of that, and that's spread out through a number of programs, including graffiti and urban forestry. About 50,000, about half of that came out of the open space. And as I mentioned earlier, we decided to pause on the weed abatement contract, which was for about $60,000. And we did that in-house. We plan on doing the same thing this fiscal year, so that $50,000 reduction. However, it will impact our services in the park during that month of weed abatement. It shouldn't have too much of a ding on the budget. And how are we going to continue to try and keep our service levels up as high as we can? It's going to be a challenge, but efficiencies. As many of you have recommended over the last 5 or 6 years, the funding that's necessary to keep our infrastructure up mainly our irrigation system. As I've told you in the past, we've replaced probably 90% of our irrigation systems in our parks. That doesn't include our downtown or in our open space, but in our parks, which is where the vast majority of that is. That has been huge benefit for the crisis that we're dealing with right now. But we also look daily basis if there's high maintenance plant material that we don't have the time to maintain. Instead of letting it grow and get out of whack and not look aesthetically pleasing, we look to remove those and come back in with something that's native. We try and add some color, but we are looking for efficiencies on a regular basis. The deep trash cans, with those CyberTech cans that we added, have been a huge help. We have removed 50 to 60 of the 55-gallon drums in Heather Farm Park and installed about 20 of these deep trash cans, and went from emptying those 55-gallon drums on a daily basis to emptying the deep trash cans every 2 to 3 weeks. So those types of efficiencies are certainly going to help. Next slide, please. So staffing levels, as I mentioned, in 2012, we had 43. Our staffing levels now are down to position-wise are at 35. We have about 28 full-time staff members currently with us. We have because of COVID and the reductions in the budget, the decision was made to freeze 4 of those positions. There are 3 positions left vacant, and at this point, we don't know when we'll be able to backfill those. It is a budgetary issue. We had 3 people move forward with the early retirement program, and in regards to retirements, we've had 6 or 7 people retire since last October. So number of vacancies, as I mentioned, we've requesting to hire 3 people back. That information is going through City Hall right now. And in terms of eliminations, which you guys may have heard about, there were a number of positions that were looking to be laid off and the positions to be eliminated. Parks and Open Space, we do have 1 elimination, and that is in the open space. So the current division, the open space division, had 7 people total, including the supervisor, 3 rangers, and 3 LMWs. And the division is now 6 people, which is a supervisor, 3 rangers, and 2 LMWs. Now, these positions are eliminated. However, they could be reinstated by council, at a future date. Next slide, please. So capital budget, as part of the staff report, I think it's attachment 1 that you guys have in your staff report. I kind of condensed this down to make it a little bit easier to read. You can see there under asset management, parks, open space, and trails, that's a $250,000 recommended by the Pros Commission and approved by City Council. We do get about $100,000 of general fund money for the infrastructure within our medians. And then, as all of you recommended, we are going to be resurfacing 2 courts out at Larkey Park. And that's $150,000 of park and lieu money. And then, as I mentioned earlier, that Prop 68 grant, there's $100,000 being spent there. Discretionary projects, Alma Park improvements, phase 1. I want to thank, I know Chair Oler was on that committee, which took place about a year ago. A number of the residents around Alma Park all were involved in that subcommittee. This project was approved or recommended by the Pros Commission and ultimately approved by Council, in which they funded $100,000. Yeah, I'm sorry, it says $50,000 here, but that was the Prop 68, from the Prop 68 grant. And then there are another $50,000 that was approved in the prior budget from the Recycle Smart Fund. So there's total $100,000 going into phase 1. Open space improvements, park and lieu, $50,000, grant $100,000. And I'm going to get more in detail on these projects on the next slide. And I think that's it. If you can move to the next slide, please, Cindy. So as I said, there's $100,000 of general fund money for the medians, which is used to replace irrigation, mostly valves and sprinkler heads, to be honest with you, and then planting ground covers. And then we've started converting all of our clocks into smart clocks. The $100,000 for the open space, and I've got a number of items listed here. I'm not going to go through them. The first 5, signage volunteer program, all the way down to sidewalk/trail at Marshall Drive. Those are our top priorities. This is where we're anticipating the majority of this funding is going to go over the next fiscal year. Signage, this is in line with the recommendations from the Walnut Creek Open Space Committee in terms of improving our signage and basically communication to the public, whether it's educational or regulatory. Trail markers so that we can give people an idea of how far they're going and give them a sense of direction so they don't get lost out there. And then we've got our monument signs that are dated and need to be updated. So we're going to be spending a considerable amount of time on signage. Volunteer plan. This is part of the recommendations from the Open Space Committee. We need to get our volunteers out there if we are going to get our open space back into the condition it was before COVID. We're going to need help from all sides. There's no doubt about it. It's our responsibility to find that balance between preserving nature and preserving recreation, and we're going to need the volunteers to help out with that. If you're ever on the Ignacio Canal Trail and you go through the tunnel there that goes under YVR, you'll see that the retaining walls are falling apart. That needs to be improved. Trail improvements and grading. There's always work that needs to be done there, and whether we're closing trails off or regrading trails, those things. And then the sidewalk/trail at the end of Marshall, which is out in front of Indian Valley School. There's a trail there that gets the kids from I don't know the name of the trail that goes through the neighborhood, but it daylights out at Marshall and then they walk up to the school. It's pea gravel. It gets muddy in the wintertime. In order to keep the kids on the sidewalk or on this trail, we're going to remove the pea gravel and put in some DG so we actually have a hard surface there. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry, can you back up? Yeah, just the next 2 points there. That RSF, just so you know, stands for the Recycle Smart Fund. So those are products made out of Recycle Smart is what we're going to be using there. So thank you, Cindy. Next slide, please. So the $200,000 of infrastructure improvements, I'm not going to touch on all these. The bigger ones here is the Larkey irrigation renovation. All of Larkey was, except for this portion, was up. The irrigation was updated a couple of years ago. This is the only piece remaining. We've got the ball fields at 1 and 2. This is within the parking lot. The infrastructure there, the irrigation infrastructure and the plant materials dated. It was put in back in 2001 and certainly needs some upgrades. We were planning some of this for Community Service Day. We were going to bring the community in to help us bark and plant. Obviously, that's not going to take place now. Most of you have probably heard that Community Service Day is canceled, other than the food drive. Our irrigation pump repairs. At all of our parks, we have irrigation pumps. We have a big one there at Heather Farm Park that needs some improvements. Civic Park needs some irrigation upgrades. And then the Penniman House has valves that haven't been replaced in about 30 years. We're going to replace those. And we have a lot of rodents over there because of the construction that takes place in Shadelands Business Park. And so we're going to put some rodent barrier in our plant beds and replant a lot of those. So next slide, please. So as you know, part of parks is maintaining the downtown. That's budgeted through our downtown fund, which is mostly funded through parking meters. Liberty Bell, we're looking to do a small renovation there. We've got fountain repairs that are dated. Our Newell pots, this is more at Newell and Broadway. If you come up South Broadway into town, you'll see there's a bunch of pots on the right-hand side. We're going to be making some improvements there. And then just valve and irrigation improvements through the downtown. Some of those valves haven't been replaced in 30 to 40 years. And so we're going to get ahead of that game. Recycle Smart, we've got a number of projects scheduled. Some are already in contract. the 2 to 5-year-old playground, 2 to 5 age playground. It's not 2 to 5 years old. We're going to be replacing at Rudgear Park, and we're also going to be installing some shade structures there, along with some shade structures at Tice Valley Park, Diablo Shadows, and Arbolado Park. The shade structures are very similar to the ones that we put in at Heather Farm. We're looking to install some more of those deep trash cans to get rid of the other high maintenance 55-gallon drums. We're in contract now to put in a small playground, or replace the small playground just behind Ball Field 4 at Heather Farm Park. And we're currently investigating and have found a company that will provide us with posts, backboards, and hoops made out of recycled steel for many of our basketball courts, and more specifically over at Arbolado. Next slide, please. So this is my second to last slide here, Janine, and then I'm going to be passing it on to you. Sorry, this is my last slide, Janine, and I'll be moving on to you. So the Open Space Committee Trail Report is something we've been working on for probably a year and a half now. There's a number of us, number of individuals on the committee, about 10 or 12. I want to thank the two chairs, Chair Oler and Vice Chair Davenport, who have been heading his efforts up. The Open Space Foundation is heavily engaged and has a number of members on this committee as well, as well as users from the equestrians and runners and bikers, and we've pulled everybody together, I think, and done a pretty good job at that to talk through some of the recommendations moving forward. Just to hit on the highlights in terms of recommendations, current policies and what changes we can make, signage improvements, as I mentioned earlier, educating, where do we start educating these people? Is it kiosks? Is it in classrooms with youngsters? Communication, public outreach is vital to try and get individuals out helping us volunteering to make some corrections and help the Open Space Foundation and the staff preserve what's out there. And then priorities and recommendations is also part of the report itself. We're hoping that we can bring this overall report to you. We wanted to do it by now, or we want to do it here, probably at the last meeting, and we've been waiting to have a meeting in person so that we could get out the entire community and give everybody an opportunity to sit and comment. And we don't know what that looks like for the next meeting. It's kind of tentative whether or not we'll bring this report to your attention at that time. And lastly, as part of the trail report, our evaluation criteria, it's probably about 4 pages long, but it's really focused around trail grade, site distance, and vegetation, and trail width. And what we're looking at is we have about 15 miles or so of single track trails, which are commonly used by unauthorized users. And we're looking to maybe look at those trails differently and to see how we could turn some of those trails into multi-use. It might take some construction and things along those lines, but we're going to be going through and evaluating each of the 15 miles and looking to make some improvements. And now I'm going to turn it over to Janine.
Thanks, Mike. My name is Janine Cavalli, and I'm a senior planner here with the city. And good evening, Chair Oler and members of the commission. I will be briefly presenting an update for you on the Your Parks, Your Future project this evening. So we started the project in June 2018 to improve the park facilities at Heather Farm Park, Civic Park, and Shadelands Art Center, and to ensure that they serve the community well into the future. This was designed as a 2-phase project. So phase 1, focusing on arts and recreation programming and the future facilities. So again, for Heather Farm Community Center, Clark Swim Center, Civic Park Community Center, and Shadelands Art Center were the 4 City Council identified critical facilities that were included in this project. And then phase 2 would look at the master planning of the Civic Park and Heather Farm, looking about 15 years into the future, creating a vision for the outdoor park spaces there. So in February of this year, we completed phase 1 of the project with direction from the City Council on the future facilities. And the recommendations include focusing first on replacing the Heather Farm Community Center and Clark Swim Center in regards to facility planning. So I want to pause here and thank all of you for your hard work on that effort. And a special thank you to Commissioner Kearsley, who sat on our advisory committee. So thank you for your leadership and participation there. And then also I'd like to thank Commissioner Moran for chairing the joint meetings with the Arts Commission. So phase 1 again came to a conclusion again with all of the input that we got from both the advisory committee, the community at large, as well as both the pros and the Arts Commission. And so staff will be preparing a sort of executive summary summarizing all of the materials and decision points around phase 1. And then, unfortunately, given the current health and economic crisis that we're in and resulting impacts on the city's budget, at the June 9th, 2020 special meeting of the City Council to discuss budget balancing solutions for fiscal year 2021, the City Council directed staff to indefinitely put the project on hold. So when Council once again directs staff to revisit the critical infrastructure planning, the facilities at Heather Farm will be the top priority for implementation. So that concludes my presentation. I don't know, Mike, if I'm handing it back to you or not.
Yes, we're going to, thanks, Janine. I appreciate your update. We're going to now move to the next slide and open it up for questions or comments, please.
Does any commissioner have any questions or comments for Mike? Please go ahead. Mike, Robert?
Thank you. Mike and Janine, thank you very much for your presentations, and thank you to staff for pulling these reports together. I do have a couple questions for Mike. One of the questions is having to do for the fiscal year 21 budget. Is the cattle grazing program impacted by this?
By impacted, I'm not sure exactly what you mean. The cattle grazing program, there is no charge to the city for the grazing of the cattle. We do in-kind service. However, there is infrastructure that the city has invested in terms of the troughs, in which we partnered with the NRCS, the National Resource Conservation District. I can't remember what that acronym stands for, but no, the grazing program for the most part has not been impacted.
Okay, and thank you for the reminder that it doesn't cost the city other than some nominal expenses around it. So that's very helpful. I noticed they're up at Lime Ridge on the Mayberry Pond side right now, and they're doing a good job. My second question has to do with as we know, and one thing I've noticed, because I go hiking in the open space and ride my mountain bike three to four times a week, thanks to working at home now. And one of the things I've noticed, and you alluded to this earlier, was in addition to the marked trails being used heavily by the public, there's now a whole lot more paths of, I'll say, unmarked trails, and ones that maybe were existing animal trails, but people decided to use them. And so you can see a significant amount of, I'll say, wear and tear on those kind of trails. I noticed up in Lime Ridge that there's been some attempts, and maybe some other areas too, to put signage, this area is closed, for example. In some instances on the trails, I noticed that there's been logs or branches or some things put in place to try to discourage people from going on those trails. My question is there, as part of the budget and kind of ongoing effort, is there any plans to, have more of these signs and markers and barriers for people to stay off those unmarked trails?
Absolutely. Weed abatement for us, just so you know, is primarily April through May, the heaviest part in May. And then it takes us a month or so to catch up on some of the other daily tasks that have been put aside during that period. We've now caught up. We have the signage, and we are going to be out there working, on shutting down those renegade trails, as we call them. As you pointed out, they're not all by bikers or hikers. Some of them were old pasture from cattle trails or game trails or something along those lines. And so we do have the signage. If we have to bring in a temp or two to help out and support the staff, we will. One of the impacts budget-wise is we've suspended all of our educational programming. And so for this next fiscal year, whether it was Harvest Festival or things along those lines, all those programs have been suspended, and all the attention will be going into preserving the open space.
Okay, thank you very much.
Jody, did you have a question or comment?
No, sorry.
Oh, okay. Any other commissioners' questions or comments?
I have one real quick. Hey, Mike, thank you very much for all your work. I'm sure it's been challenging, is probably an understatement. Is there anything that, in terms of like community outreach or messaging that you could use any help with in terms of, if we're out just talking to people about, hey, you're on, what's going on with the open space? So there's a lot of people in it, or what about the playgrounds? Or does that make sense? Is there anything that we can do, like boots on the ground, in terms of just helping you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and this goes for the recreation staff. I'm sure Karen and I communicate regularly. So do Jim and I communicate regularly on this. It's challenging because everybody's been locked up for so long. Just complying with the social distancing rules would be wonderful. Never mind all the renegade trails. Just complying with the social distancing rules so we can get this behind us and move on would be extremely beneficial. It's difficult to remind your neighbor or the individual that's walking by you on the trail because people get upset and sometimes they're uncomfortable conversations. We were working diligently with Betsy Burkhart in order to get this information out. It goes out through Nextdoor. It definitely goes out through the city manager's updates, and we could probably push more of that out. However, I think everybody understands at this point that they need to kind of police themselves. In terms of the open space, this is one of the reasons that we need to focus on getting the volunteers involved, is so that the volunteers can help police themselves. If they're going to be out there physically, putting that sweat equity into moving those logs around and hammering those signs in the ground, I think that they're going to feel the need to remind people, hey, this area is off limits. Don't ruin it for the rest of us, and let's help preserve what we have. This is one of the gems of the city. So that information needs to get out there for sure. We've been wanting to do some videos out there, and actually, instead of just having the text out there, letting people get a visual idea of the impacts that are taking place in the open space. Anytime you put in a renegade trail, the studies have shown that it's about 15 feet on either side. You've just created a human buffer. And so the animals get condensed more and more and more into these smaller areas every time you put in a trail because of the scent left behind. So it does have an impact on wildlife, and not everybody recognizes that. They say, hey, this trail's already here, I can keep going down it. So to your point, Brandon, yeah, absolutely, you can help message. You could even help us maybe get some videos out there, but the public really needs to police themselves and respect what they have. And let me back up. A small percentage of the public, the vast majority of them are certainly complying with the social distancing rules and some of our open space guidelines.
Okay, any other questions or comments from our commissioners? If not, I just had one question for you, Mike, and then a comment. The question with the staff reductions, which are significant, and I know that there's also reductions in the capital budget and the operating budgets and everything. So in some respects, there's less money to do things, but it still seems like there are a lot of things to be done that are now funded for this fiscal year. Public Works, prepared to take it all on. I mean, I know some are contracted out, some projects are contracted, but it still looks like a large scope of work.
There's no doubt it's going to be a challenge. We are going to have to bring all of the resources together. The engineering team helps us out with a lot of these designs, puts the contracts together for us, so that saves us some of the legwork. But in terms of being out in the field, you're going to find more parks employees out in the open space from time to time, helping shut down trails. We may find some of the open space staff, as limited as they are, in some of the parks, helping with litter or installation or planting or along some of those lines. We're being forced to be more creative than we have in the past, and we'll continue to do whatever we can to keep the public safe and do our part in ensuring that the infrastructure is being maintained to the best of our ability.
The flexibility of staff and the roles that they're taking on is going to make a difference. So, I think I can speak for everybody here, and maybe for a lot of people that have been out in the open space in particular, despite unprecedented demand. In other words, people out there over the last several months. I've heard a lot of comments of a very favorable nature about what Public Works staff has been able to do, and it's very visible. And I've noticed things, but just a couple of examples. A simple thing like some bridge boards going out on the bridge at the opening part of the trail that comes off the head of Wiggett. There's a little bridge there. One friend of mine said he noticed it one day. He was ready to call it in. The next day, you guys had already been out there and fixed it. So, and I've seen your staff out there fixing gates multiple times, the same gate multiple times, and various things like that. That's just an example of all the staff that's gone above and beyond over the last several months. So, our congratulations and thanks for everything the staff has done to really keep the gem of Walnut Creek open when so many other things were closed. Thank you.
Thank you, Art, and I'll be sure and share that with the entire staff. I appreciate that.
All right. Heather, just a procedural question. Do we open up to the public comments or questions for these reports?
No, this isn't a consideration item, so you just hear the report.
All right. So with that, unless there's anything else, we're going to move on to the report for Arts and Recreation fiscal year 21 budget update, and then probably the recreation classes and social services annual update.
Thank you, Chair Oler. Can you hear me? Thank you, Robert. For the record, Kevin Safine, Director of Arts and Recreation. It's my pleasure. Congratulations, Chair Oler and Vice Chair Davenport. My pleasure to see you this evening. I had the luxury of sitting in Mrs. Ballinger's seat last week for the Arts Commission when Sandra Naughton presented this on our behalf. But she decided to take vacation this week, so you're stuck with me. You have in your packet a report summarizing our budget. I will not go into detail about that. I'm going to hit the high points and then leave time for questions if you have any when we close. So Cindy, if you can pull up the report, please. Thank you. And next slide. So what I will do is go over some of the work that staff did to respond to, and this mirrors a little bit of what Mr. Vickers described for you, to respond to COVID back in the spring, summarize our results for you from the last fiscal year, which ended on June 30th, talk about the work to prepare the adopted budget for the current fiscal year, some of the work we did initially to respond to COVID, and then some additional direction we got from council, and then talk about what we're doing now to respond to demands from the community. Next slide. Okay, so yes, in March, our world changed in so many ways that we don't even know yet. But what that meant for arts and recreation is that all facilities and our programming basically stopped. We canceled classes, all the sports leagues, drop-in activities, our rentals, performance and events. This extends beyond the recreation side, which is your purview, to the arts side as well. So summarize a little bit when we get to the numbers, but this went from basically moving at a speed of 100 miles an hour to a screeching halt for our programs, which was, I think, devastating for a lot of people. And we'll talk about that in a bit in terms of the numbers. But we didn't just say, okay, we're going to wait until things happen. Our staff proactively thought about what can we do to meet the needs of the community, especially those who are affected most acutely by the shelter-in-place order. So we did things such as our senior care team, which reached out to seniors for the most part who were homebound, that did not have really any social contact, just to make contact with those folks and see sometimes what their needs were, and sometimes just have somebody to talk to. So our staff was involved in that. We launched a program called Neighbor Express, which paired volunteers in the community to people who are homebound or maybe reluctant to go out to grocery stores. So we connected people who wanted to volunteer to do shopping for people or pick up medications or prescriptions at the drugstore and deliver those to people's homes. Very successful. Both those programs are still in place. We launched a virtual community center across the department to provide services online in a way that we hadn't done before, that we wanted to do before, including virtual classes, which we found to be successful, perhaps not as successful as we might otherwise be if we were in person, but it met a need that we didn't know there was a huge demand for, but we were able to meet that need. So that also is still in place with our virtual programming. And then when we got to May, we were able to reopen some of our programs in person, specifically tennis and golf, which was direction from the county to allow us to get back into those businesses, which was great. Allowed us to do a whole lot more and really made a difference on not just the programming side and the community side, but also financial. I'll talk about that shortly. Cindy, next slide. So this is we say preliminary because these are unaudited numbers. This is the numbers that have come in through the end of the fiscal year. So don't quote me yet on this, but Mike summarized that the city's looking at a $10 million deficit, which is the revenue loss essentially from sales tax, hotel tax, and arts and recreation. So about 4.7 million of the revenue loss was driven by the sudden stop in our programs for the last quarter. The last quarter is a very, very busy quarter for us in the fiscal year. So that 4.7 million, if you look at where we thought we would be in the budget, about 11.8 million at year end, turned out to be about 7.1 million at year end. On the expense side, we did take steps to reduce our expenses to about 2.7 million from where we thought we'd be budget-wise, so from 18.7 to 16 million. So what do we do to get there? Reduced our contracts with our teaching artists and instructors who, classes weren't being offered. So obviously those stopped. Reduced some of our equipment facility repairs, had savings in utilities, supplies. A big portion of the savings, unfortunately, was to our hourly staff who, we weren't providing, the pool wasn't open, so our lifeguards weren't working. The leisure center wasn't open, so our ticket agents, ticket scanners weren't working. So had a big impact, not just on the community, like I said, but also on staff. And so the net result of that was that 4.7 million revenue loss, which we try to offset as much as we could through expenditure savings, but there's still that $2 million gap as a net at the end of the fiscal year. That's the general fund. On the good news, next slide on Boundary Oak. We thought we were going to be looking at a pretty big deficit when we shut down the course in March. Thankfully, we were able to reopen in May. And as soon as we opened, we had hundreds of people ready to play. We had 300 plus people on the first day we reopened in early May. So whereas we thought we'd be looking at a deficit, needing to use reserves to balance because it's an enterprise fund, which means we don't get support from the general fund. So at year end, our revenue loss from where we thought we'd be from about 5.2 was 4.6 million, so a loss of about 530,000. But we had savings on the expenditure side, which is primarily staff because we weren't able to do any events. So we reduced our staff in the clubhouse and also reduced the maintenance staff on the course. So we ended up just barely in the black up at Boundary Oak, but that was a huge change from where we thought we were going to be when we anticipated 6 figures in the red. So thank you to all the people out there who play golf. Thanks to those of you who play golf. You continue to come out there and we appreciate that. So that's the 1920 fiscal year that ended June 30th, results for both general fund and golf course. Next slide, Cindy. Now I'll talk about the current fiscal year. Minimize my slide here. When we developed the budget, we were looking at about $11.5 million worth of revenue. That was pre-COVID. We were looking at about 18.3 million worth of expenses. As a result of changes that were made, both that we did proactively in terms of reducing our expenses, as well as what we anticipated losses of revenue, we went from projected 11.5 million revenue budget to about a $5 million revenue budget, and then reduced the expenses from about 18.3 to about 13.1. So significant reductions, and I'll summarize what those meant in a second. I'll talk about the golf course next, Cindy. Similarly, this is largely driven by the clubhouse being closed, at least for the first half of the year. We reduced our revenue from what we thought was going to be about 5.4 million to 4 million. And then the expenses from about 5.3 to 4. So the budget's still balanced because enterprise fund we need to balance. We're hopeful that those trends continue and that we're maybe slightly offsetting the expenses with the revenue. And we're optimistic that we'll get back to reopening the clubhouse, doing more events. But if not, we're still fairly confident that golf will be able to drive the revenue as it is today. But when it gets to the winter months, there's not as much golf played, largely because of daylight, but also because of the weather. So we're hopeful that we can get back and open, but we are also doing as much as we can to drive revenue on the golf side and reduce expenses. So I'll summarize a bit about what has changed. Next slide, Cindy. So to get to this is general fund. To get to the reductions that I was talking about, we are contemplating a reduction in essentially expenses by about 3 million before we even brought this to council. We saw COVID was here, we reduced the budget by about 3 million. Most of that, 60% plus, is related to the leisure center. We anticipate the center and our center repertory company being closed at least through January, if not beyond. And then we also reduced some of our instructors and our teaching artists. I mentioned our hourly staff before. Most of our hourly staff that work for us year round are not on the schedule anymore, at least for the near future. And then reductions in supplies and utilities. So that was all before we presented the budget to council. When we were looking at the reduction in our revenue, council gave us further direction to cut our expenses to offset the revenue loss. The total reduction in expenses worked out to about 5.2 million. To get to the additional 2.2 beyond the 3 that we are starting with, most of that was through reductions in staff, as well as hourly employees and equipment and supplies. So pretty significant reductions. You have a chart in your staff report that talks about roughly 20 positions being affected either through layoffs or furloughs, which works out to about 11 and a quarter full-time equivalents. So it's been, I can't state this strongly enough, a very difficult time for, as Mike talked about, for his department. Very true, same for our department. I think our two departments were hit the hardest in this crisis as far as staff. So we are working as much as we can to try to offset those staff reductions through some work with our labor units as much as we can. But right now we're looking at a pretty significant hit to hourly staff and to our regular staff. So what does this mean? Next slide, Cindy. What does this mean on the other side? Commissioner Moran was asking Mike about what can we do. As commissioners, you can talk about the things we are doing, not about things we aren't doing. The staff in our department aren't looking at this as let's just sit on our hands and wait until the county or the governor tell us we can reopen. We are proactively and aggressively focused on what we can do to not just drive revenue because we need to, but also to increase the essentialness, my word, essentialness of our services to the community and demonstrate that. And so if you're out in the community and you want to talk about a bit related to what we're doing, what's open. We've got classes that are still taking place online. Our fall guide just went out this weekend. You may have seen that. So there are classes that are still being signed up for that are online. Golf course is open. Driving range is open. Driving range is open at night. Coming out anytime you want to play, we're there for you at a social distance appropriately. Tennis courts are open. Pickleball courts are open. Programs for seniors that I mentioned online, virtually, Neighbor Express, senior care team, those are still going. We've been doing camps. We started doing lap swim. Our preschools are open, and we're doing outdoor facility rentals, picnics specifically. That's what's open now. Cindy, next slide. Where are we going? We're hoping to do more outdoor classes in the fall, where it provides us an opportunity to be safe and healthy, and providing services the community is looking for. Bedford Gallery at the Leisure Center is opening its next exhibition soon. We're going to do virtual tours of that, hoping that people who can't get out of their home or who want to experience art are able to do that. We're launching a new program called our School Day Enrichment Programming, which is going to provide services for a half day on a pilot basis for the first 3 weeks of school, which starts on August 17th, whereas we're providing both classes and enrichment programs, as well as an opportunity for kids to do just homework or engage with school on our site, either in Civic Park or at Heather Farm, again, at appropriate social distance. We're seeing a lot of demand for that. We just launched that registration on Friday, so we're taking registrations starting on Wednesday for programs that start in just a couple weeks. So we're excited, really excited about that. And then we're continuing to enhance our partnerships to meet the community's needs. So we are not waiting. We are continuing to be forceful in the way that we are providing services to the community. And I'll close with two more things. And that's fine, that slide's fine. The issues around diversity, inclusion are important to this department. And so that's going to be one of the areas of focus for us, is how do we help to engage the community through areas of inclusion, discussion about Black lives in a way that's meaningful and makes a difference for this community through the service that we offer, because we see ourselves as a catalyst and a tool for that dialogue to initiate and for the dialogue to continue. So we're looking forward to that. And then we anticipate coming back even stronger through the great work, and Mike said this about his staff, I echo that, for the public works staff, as well as for the arts and rec staff, is through the creative and dedicated and committed and passionate work that our staff brings to the table every day. Even though we are smaller, we are still committed and focused on delivering the essential services that you've come to expect of our department on a daily basis. And so we very much look forward to turning the corner on this crisis and being at the forefront of providing solutions as we move forward, whether it's economic, social, or just wanting to be out there in the community. So in closing, I want to thank the Commission for your ongoing support for this department, and I'd be happy to take any questions that you
Any questions for Mr. Safin? Jody?
Yeah, I just had a question, Kevin, whether they've considered, I know that there was a price increase for for the swimming in particular. I was wondering, due to the extreme demand and that it's pulling people from pretty much really far away, if there was any consideration either for swimming or for golf to consider the Walnut Creek resident or having different prices than a non-residents. I know this has come up in the past, but due to the fact that it's very limited resources available, and it seems like there's a lot of competition for those spots, whether it was something you had considered.
Right. Good question. Thank you. The only area we do offer that resident, non-resident differential is at the golf course because of history. I can't give you all the details now, but that is the one area where we do provide both different rates as well as an opportunity to reserve a tee time earlier than non-residents. And it does help to give residents a break, an opportunity on a pretty scarce resource at this point. I don't have enough time to give you my dissertation on my philosophy on resident versus non-resident. The city used to do that. When I got to the organization, we started paring that back. Let me give you the very most basic reason why we don't do it. I reduced staff, and for our staff to spend their time identifying who is and who isn't a Walnut Creek resident. There are 10,000 or so people who live in the city of Walnut Creek, but don't live in the city of Walnut Creek, if that makes sense, which means they're unincorporated Walnut Creek. So staff had to look through a book, and find out who was and who wasn't a city resident, even though they had a Walnut Creek address. And so we found that to be not a great use of time and a very dissatisfying answer when we tell people, sorry, you don't live in the city, even though you have a Walnut Creek address. So we've become accustomed to moving away from that. We are a regional program. We like drawing from people outside of the city. The fact that the demand is scarce, I think that's temporary. I'm sorry, the supply is scarce. I think the demand will continue to grow as our supply grows, whether that's aquatics or whether it's ball fields. So I'm very confident that the revenue that we would get incrementally and managing that demand incrementally will be offset by the volume that we gain in having no differential in the fee. So we can spend more time on that. I'm happy to make a presentation on that more fully at a future meeting, but my philosophy at this point is that we maintain the same rates for all users, which is part of Walnut Creek's tradition in terms of being a regional serving community.
But should it go that direction, it seems that the vendor, since it is all online right now, should be able to use like the credit card information. If you did it to everyone, just saying that everyone that has a Walnut Creek actual address, you know, discounting the unincorporated complexities, does seem like that would not cost additional staff time, because as far as I'm aware, there's no way to pay in cash right now.
Yep. Thank you for your input.
Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Kearsley.
Kevin, you mentioned about now that we're kind of in a paradigm shift and we have these virtual classes that were offered, arts and recreation, and I guess the community center virtual classes. You mentioned it being success. What kind of measure are you using kind of to say a success? Is it based on, you know, certain number of enrollment, or how are we gauging that in terms of being success thus far?
There's different ways we can measure that. Yeah, one of course is enrollment. The other would be revenue. There's not a ton of revenue as much with this as you might expect, but we're seeing some revenue. I think the best way to measure that is what our instructors feel about it, because it's new, right? I mean, we're all doing this right now, which is we're not in the same room with each other, but we're teaching each other. Do they like it? Do they want to come back as a way to keep their face in front of the community? Yes, we're seeing more and more instructors interested in that. And then primarily, what about the students? Are they coming back? Are they returning to this, whether they're seniors learning Zoom for the first time, or others who are re-enrolling in our programs? So we are seeing more of that. People who are at home with their kids who want dance classes, or other things that they may be able to engage with. So we're seeing a fair amount of interest in that as well for the fall. So, you know, we're just getting started on this, literally. And as we learn more, I would expect when we see this Kat Reisinger's report next year, we'll have a fairly good summary of how we're doing. So I appreciate the question. We'll note that. And when Kat gives her presentation, you can ask for specifics about that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Fred, did you have something?
Yeah, I'd just like, Kevin, if you could elaborate a little bit more on your student programs. I'm not exactly how to phrase that. Are we working a little bit with our school districts to see where we can augment what they're doing and enhance the experience for the kids, and especially help out parents that seem to be at quite a loss on how to move forward in this new educational environment?
Right. So there are a couple ways that we're working with the community, one with the school district in particular, and I'll talk about that. And then Carolyn, if it's okay, I'm going to tee you up for answering the broader question about the curriculum. That's okay. So let me talk first, Commissioner Weston, about what we're doing with the schools. They approached us, the Walnut Creek School District approached the city about potentially partnering around childcare for children of faculty and staff who are, I believe, I understand, going to be working on site. So they'll be teaching their class remotely through their classroom to students at home, like my kids. We've been asked, are we able to help provide childcare services to those students of Walnut Creek School District staff and faculty? We're exploring that right now. We just started this conversation last week. We're trying to turn this around in a couple weeks, but there is demand that we've heard from the district staff and their employees. So we're excited about that opportunity to provide services and give work to our staff in real time in a way that meets a need. So thank you for the question. We're excited that could be a model that we provide to that community. And then I'll let Carolyn talk a bit more about the curriculum that we're going to offer through our school day program for residents.
Thanks, Kevin. Carolyn Jackson, Community Relations Manager for Arts and Rec. So I'm just going to talk briefly about what we're calling our pilot, because at this stage, there's very limited information from each of the school districts that serves Walnut Creek about what their schedules are going to be like. And that could vary also across the school districts, across each individual teacher. So we have a 3-week pilot that we're launching. And the concept is really that we're going to iterate and adapt and change based on what we learn and what the school districts are learning as well. So for the first 3 weeks, it's a half-day program, Monday through Thursday, and it's a combination of all of our available programming. So it'll be sort of a mix of what you might consider our day camp program, where there's some physical activity, arts and crafts, things that are a little more self-driven since we're in a socially distanced scenario, but also introducing some of our instructors from both Center for Community Arts and Recreation to do some more specialized skill building and some special classes in visual arts or cooking or developing some sports skills that again are non-contact in this scenario. And that'll run for 3 weeks. We're building in staff to be able to support helping students kind of jump in and out because they'll need to perhaps do a Zoom check-in with their teacher in the middle of this program. We're trying to be very flexible given that we don't know what to expect from the schools at this point. And then the idea is that we'll continue to grow this program, expand locations, maybe expand to Shadelands, expand to Tice as things develop, and really hone in on what's going to make sense based on what the schools are sharing with us and what our parents are sharing with us. And then we're exploring, as Kevin said, with the school district, we're exploring some other options we have in terms of potential waivers from the state for other types of programming. Right now, that half-day programming 4 days a week is the max that we're able to offer under a license exempt scenario, which is what we currently have. So we're exploring other options, but that's where we're at.
Thank you, Carol. Any other commissioner comments or questions?
I just want to give one more comment that, I think this is across the board, that I really admire the flexibility that the city staff have put into opening facilities, to creating new programming, to just really being responsive to ask, having surveys. I've received some surveys about what the parents are looking for. And I feel like you guys have just done a tremendous job when there's no roadmap for dealing with this kind of pandemic. And I really have seen it, both as a citizen and as a commissioner, that, it's been admirable to see all the things that we have offered in our city, given these really crazy circumstances. So thank you all.
Thank you, Jude.
Definitely second that. Okay, I guess we have the recreation classes and social services annual update now. Is that correct? Is Kat going to do that?
Good evening. Do I just hop right in? Is that how that works? Seeing none, I will go for it. Good evening, everyone. For the record, my name is Kat Reisinger. I am a program manager in the Arts and Recreation Department. I generally oversee the Civic Park Community Center, fondly called the Senior Center for some circles. In your packet, you should have received a very detailed annual report for our division, or my division. So I'm just going to hit a few highlights. Cindy, next slide, please. I generally oversee the recreation classes, specialized recreation, and the social services, which is mainly senior services for the Arts and Recreation Department. As an overview, for recreation, which is your traditional recreation, if you look at it, think after school classes, programming, your health and fitness programs that you're out there, there's summer day camps. We have over 250 different types of recreation camps and programs for all ages. And we emphasize fun, learning, and opportunities for all interests. Excuse me, my division houses the majority of the city's social services, which kind of can be lumped into two different categories, which could be seniors or individuals with disabilities, fondly called our specialized recreation program. The division at the Civic Park Community Center emphasizes creative partnerships, shared services, and grant management. We are home to 2 large grants that will be helping provide services for the communities in the next year. That's the TransPac Senior Transportation Grant. Go ahead, Cindy, it's okay, let's move forward. And the CDBG funding grant for the Senior Care Support Team Coordinator, which I will touch on at a later slide. Some fun year highlights, and boy, has it been a year. I do want to take the moment to say that on I believe my 3rd day on the job last year, I was standing in the city council chambers, standing next to Carolyn Jackson, supporting her make this annual report as my 3rd day ever working as a City of Walnut Creek employee. And it has been 365 plus a few days since then. And it is a very different environment, but I'm very excited to be here, especially from what you guys have said in terms of the flexibility and creative elements that the Arts and Recreation Department is able to afford me as an employee. Some exciting year highlights is we continue at the community center to be a hub for social interaction, senior inclusion, and community gatherings. Before COVID, if you walked into our facility, you would see a lot of people, all different ages, in the playground, talking, sitting out at the beautifully remodeled Recycle Smart's Money Plaza area, engaged in social interaction and just enjoying their beautiful city. In the last year, we have had an introduction of successful intergenerational community events, such as Grandparents' Day at Larky Pool. It was a partnership event with the Aquatics Division to get some seniors into a different area of the facility and with the city, as well as the super popular Trunk or Treat. I am currently in communication with Walnut Creek Downtown and Kathy Hemingway to figure out a Halloween event for this year. We're hopeful that maybe we can do something, car parade or something along those lines. But we did see that with the influx of newer families in some of the apartment buildings, that Civic Park Community Center does have a calling to be a more intergenerational facility. So we're excited to meet some of those community needs. We have expanded our community partnerships and grants to increase the reach of social services. As I mentioned, in addition to applying for and being re-awarded the TransPac grant for continued senior transportation money, we were also successful in getting some CDBG COVID specialty funding to help support the senior care staff member, which I will cover later in the slide, but that is over a $40,000 grant money for the next fiscal year, which is pretty exciting that we were chosen for that opportunity. Program participation continues to be very popular, even virtually, as Director Safin mentioned. during the COVID program pilot, which is kind of what I've called it, we moved everything from on-site programs to virtually, and I was a bit hesitant on how well that would go. We have, especially within the adult and the older adult population, seen a lot of increased participation in the virtual programs. Youth programs during the school year, we found that parents were tired of doing Zoom programming, if you will. By early June, they had already done a lot of Zoom classes with their teachers and were just ready for their kids to get out and play. We are really excited to be launching a few different Zoom and virtual programs for youth as well as adult and seniors in fall. Cindy, next slide, please. So I'm going to go into each area of the specialty. Once again, the division that I oversee is generally broken up into 3 areas: specialized recreation, social services, and traditional recreation, if you will call it traditional. For specialized recreation, that's the recreation programs that cover individuals with adaptive needs. We had a really great year planned. COVID, unfortunately, has kind of put a bump in things, but we are still pivoting and we're still successful. Last year, during the summer, we were able to launch a private swim lesson program through the aquatics division to provide 21 lessons in the summer spec rec camp program for adaptive needs individuals only. So these are individuals with either physical, mental, or behavioral issues. And they were taught through Larky swim instructors in partnership with the aquatics division, which was really, truly fantastic. And we were on par to have them sold out for this year. Unfortunately, due to social distancing requirements, even though we were able to successfully have 5 weeks, of spec rec camp, we could not figure out how to transport the individuals with staffing restraints from the civic park community over to Larky Pool. Hopefully that's not going to be the case next year, but we already have it on the list to figure out. We were able to partner with the Center for Community Arts to offer new mixed media arts classes and adaptive dance programs for the fall quarter, which totaled 10 classes serving 8 individuals. A new type of programming opportunity where instead of having employee-led programs, they were through the independent contractor instructor basis, which is a model that we are going to be moving into to be able to offer a greater variety of programs for individuals with specialized recreation. This year, we were very excited to launch a brand new inclusion spaces program for high functioning individuals. It was going to be 3 weeks in June. We had 32 spaces. They were all sold out. These are for summer camp youth who are going to be placed into the Walnut Creek Day Camp program. And they are individuals who might be high energy or have some ADHD or very high functioning autism, and they don't necessarily want to be in a specialized recreation program, but they need a little extra help to keep up with the neurotypical child. So we are very excited. The space is sold out. Unfortunately, due to COVID and the county restrictions, we did have to cancel those classes, but we are anxious and excited to try that program model moving forward in multiple areas of our program. I just thought this was sweet. There's a little over $2,800 was donated by individuals to help the spec rec programming to offset our costs for the summer camp. So thank you to any individual who might be on the call hearing that. It means a lot to be able to help us keep the program at an affordable rate. During COVID, that didn't stop us to be able to deliver programming for individuals with adaptive needs. We started a group called Conversation with Preston, which meets on Thursday mornings, and they talk about everything from their favorite superhero to what do they do when they go on a walk with their neighborhood. And we've had participation numbers in the dozens, agreeing and partnering and having a fun time with this group. We also did bingo for specialized recreation, which was very fun and well attended. Next slide, please, Cindy, unless anyone has a question before I move on. I don't see anybody, just checking. Recreation programs, again, this is quote unquote your typical recreation, your independent contractor led programs for after school classes or independent contractor specialty camps. Our expanded youth sports and health and fitness programs were very popular. In your packet, you will see some charts where those keep trending upwards. Those were actually some of our programs that did happen virtually. We had Skyhawks happen virtual camps where we had the instructor drop off basketball, different basketball materials to families, and they were able to participate virtually. A new thing that was very exciting for us was to branch into the parent and baby toddler offerings at all of our community center locations. Very intriguing idea to get your individual community member into your center at an early age, and then hopefully keep them all the way through their demographic years to be able to offer them services. We've also been able to increase the diversity of culinary offerings and one-night workshops for adults, such as the plant and wine night. We have multiple different diversities and ethnicities types of cooking events paired with wine evenings, speaker series that come through as well. Very popular, very exciting. We are launching some virtual cooking workshops over the fall program as well. Including in creative pricing. If you get your group together, you can do it as a group thing, kind of a, instead of paint and sip on site, it's cook and sip at your house, but led as a group. So trying anything and everything we can to keep it exciting and new. As Director Safin mentioned, we are focusing on more inclusive and diverse programming centered around social and emotional intelligence and cultural diversity. We did have a Spanish immersion kindergarten camp that was going to be starting in fall, some other language immersion camps, as well as Kids Power and Youth Girls Workshop for leadership programs. They are all moving virtually at the moment. However, we are also trying to per my last point, move things outdoors as much as possible with the county health orders. There is the ability to social distance in the parks, but we are trying to get our instructors to feel as comfortable as possible outside as our participants, while still being able to provide the high quality staffing support during a class that is led outdoors. So we're working on it, but we have the attitude of we're going to try it and see what can happen. Worst thing is we'll just kind of rebound and figure out how to solve it for the next time. Cindy, next slide, please, unless anyone has questions. Wonderful. For active aging services. Last year, we were able to offer over 23 free educational workshops. These were everything from financial abuse counseling to health screening, home match support, and a lot of Alzheimer's support was one of our focuses for the last year. We had over 750 older adults attend these complimentary workshops on site at the Civic Park Community Center, which was very exciting for us. We have been able to partner with ARP and are going to be partnering with Covia Well Connected into the fall to be able to continue to offer these social services virtually to seniors. There is a common misbelief that seniors do not know how to Zoom or do not know how to Google Hangout. Well, we have a senior resource hotline that will teach you how to Google Hangout or Google Resource Shop, and it has been wonderful. We've even been fortunate enough to work with a few of the police department individuals where through our senior hotline, we let them know we need a little bit of help. They went over and helped the adult turn on, figure out how to get into Zoom. And it's been very exciting to help combat the mental isolation and social isolation feelings of depression and loneliness during COVID. Our Meals on Wheels program served 369 individual seniors for a total of 10,156 nutritious meals. Even though our facility site is currently closed, the actual headquarters is right across the street, and Executive Director Caitlin Sly and I are in communication on a regular basis, and they are still working with us to serve the population of Walnut Creek. We, through our Neighbor Express program, do deliver some meals for Meals on Wheels as well. Our senior transportation program had a total of 1,971 minibus rides and 4,288 lift rides, totaling about 6,259 rides. It has obviously taken a decrease during the COVID timeframe. However, we did pivot. Instead of only offering transportation dispatching hours, that's when you can call in to get a ride from Monday through Friday from 9 to 10. We opened it from Monday through Friday from 9 to 3. So even though our numbers went down, we were able to get a lot of new calls and new users to come in and utilize the program. And it will be continuing into fall, which we are really excited to be able to receive the TransPAC funding again, especially from Mayor Haskew. She's been a very avid, supportive proponent of our funding for that program. So we'll continue. We have reached out to our minibus volunteer drivers who are mostly seniors. That might not happen until January. I tried to get the bus to put a plastic thing in the bus, but it just didn't work out. So we're going to see what we can do our best to meet those needs. And then we do have the creation of the COVID senior care team. Cindy, next slide, please. So this is the senior care support team that Director Safine referenced. Basically, our team, my team, as the hub of senior social services during COVID. Right when COVID happened, I don't know about you guys, but I went into a meeting on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday I was told I can't come back to work. And then 6 weeks later, I still wasn't back at work. And it was kind of a little caught off guard. I'm sure the seniors were caught off guard as well. And we very early on detected that they needed some additional support than what we were able to provide originally, or what the county was able to provide. Long story short, from seeing this need, we were able to develop a senior resource hotline, which has been currently staffed 7 days a week from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. by originally arts and recreation staff members from every single division. We had someone from aquatics, the Bedford, the leisure center, program rentals, summer day camp. It was all, everyone pitched in because the facilities were closed and they needed to work and they needed to contribute to the community. I am very thankful to say that on the last bullet point on the slide, with the CDBG COVID funding, we are able to hire a senior care coordinator who's going to be starting next month, or this month, August. Sorry, I did this slide 2 days ago, starting in August. And she was our transportation coordinator, so I'm really excited to be bringing her back on the team. And we are going to be launching new library book delivery through partnership with the Walnut Creek Library, customized farmers market shopping through volunteers through an app that we'll be teaching seniors how to use, as well as an expanded volunteer tracking software to be able to track base of our volunteers, because we were using a super fancy Excel sheet last time. This program has been able to, my third bullet point on here, it coordinates the volunteer-based delivery of groceries, meals, household necessities, farmers market boxes, activity booklets for seniors without access to internet, as well as a variety of other ideas for almost 1,000 deliveries that have been performed to seniors from volunteers in the community. It's an amazing resource, and I feel so very lucky to be part of this program to be able to help get seniors the items that they need to basically survive. In addition to being able to provide them with physical resources, part of this team makes senior wellness calls to help combat social isolation and promote mental wellness. These are, we literally have a database of individuals where we can see their age, and we look at them and we call them up and we say, "Hi, my name's Kat. I'm from the Arts and Recreation Department. I'm calling with the city of Walnut Creek, and we just want to know, are you okay? Do you need anything? How's it going?" From this point, we have been able to identify over 20 senior individuals who would like weekly calls to make sure that they're okay. The police department has graciously gone out to over half a dozen individual homes to deliver special activity packets and check in with these seniors on their own and let them know that the police department and the city of Walnut Creek is available for any resources that they need and any assistance. And it has just been truly wonderful to be part of this team, to be able to know that we are providing answers and resources to this community. I don't want to go into it too much. You probably saw from the weekly reports some different feedback and testimonials, but it has been absolutely wonderful. And again, I feel very thankful to be working for the city of Walnut Creek, where when this idea came up, it was supported tremendously from the entire management and not just shot down because it had never been done before. Well, we've done it and it's great, and we're going to continue to do it, and we have funding to be able to do it, and the seniors need it. In addition to that, as I said, introduction of Zoom programming to seniors for social services and fun. We have educational workshops, financial abuse, travel from your armchair, all the way to bingo, trivia, bird talks, a gardening group that's very active right now. It's very exciting. So please feel free to jump on any call that you would like to. It's very exciting. Next slide, please. Facility improvements, everything's been going on. Our facility did get a super tiny facelift, which we're still very happy about. We got a brand new Bluetooth and virtual HVAC in the main community center and assembly hall. So literally from my phone, I can turn it up or down or change the heating. It's really wonderful. In my office specifically is in the lobby office, as well as Mr. Preston Jones' office. And we are always freezing because the lobby has to stay extra cold because the doors keep open when it's warm. So it's really fun and exciting, but we are very excited to be able to change the temperature, which has resulted in some energy savings and electrical savings because we can turn it down at night and adjust it to events, which is very great. We painted the lobby and refreshed the hallways and the walkways. We installed new ADA accessible doors for both the main front door and the assembly hall, which are beautiful. You wave your hand at a button and tap it a little bit and it opens perfectly, which for the senior center, we didn't have that ability beforehand. So this has been incredibly well received. We installed a new roof to the main community center, which actually matches the roof that you see in this photo. For the assembly hall roof, it looks great, should be repelling some of the heat from our facility as well. And then I did include a public art "We Will All Be" painted by Monica and Zara that happened in summer of last year, which is beautiful and really adds a pop of color to our facility and is really nice to see when you walk through every single morning. Cindy, next slide, please. So this is going to be my last slide, the focus for the upcoming year. We do have a lot of work coming with COVID, but we are up to the challenge and we're going to continue to enhance our virtual social service resources and remote support through seniors through the Senior Care Support Team and Senior Care Support Coordinator. As I mentioned, we do have the library book delivery coming up. We have a farmers market vendor app coming up, and then in connection with Walnut Creek Downtown to try and figure out some additional meal support for low-income seniors. So that is going to be pretty exciting moving forward, and it's going to be ever evolving. We are going to be rolling out a restructured specialized recreation program through shared services and enhanced partnership model. This is when we're offering more inclusion spaces within the specialized recreation program and additional scholarship opportunities. Working alongside the Walnut Creek Seniors Club, we are going to strategically pivot programming resources to best serve the seniors as COVID continues to change programming and the service landscape. I am in communication with the Walnut Creek Seniors Club on a weekly, if not daily basis on trying to figure out how to best support their needs. They have a newsletter that's coming out. The activity packet gets delivered to seniors that don't have access to internet on a monthly basis. And we are just working together. I feel very fortunate to have a wonderful board to work with at the moment where we are trying best to meet the needs of the community as much as possible in an ever-changing landscape. The Recreation Scholarship Program is getting a tiny facelift. Thank you to Carolyn Jackson and her team who has already put it online to help with the scholarship program for the after school enrichment program to make it easier for individuals to apply and get awarded funds in a more timely manner, which is very good. And I would hope and to be able to increase the intergenerational offerings available at Civic Park Community Center. I have a lot of ideas for programs and events, but the COVID landscape is going to dictate whether or not those can roll out on an on-site basis, as well as the continued increased and purposeful partnerships across all divisions of the Arts and Recreation Department to continue supporting the community with accessible and affordable programs with reduced available sources. As a manager team, we are meeting almost daily trying to figure out how we can best leverage what we all bring to the table individually to still provide the community with as many services as possible with some of our reduced resources. So really capitalizing on the staff talent that we have currently available and what we can do to help increase the community. So with that, are there any questions, any specific points you'd like me to elaborate on? Again, in your packet, you will see some detailed numbers and slides and budget information that I'd be more than happy to answer at this moment or can touch base with you offline as well.
Thank you, Kat. Commissioners, any comments or questions? I don't see any hands raised, so I'll make a comment for you, Kat. I just wanted to congratulate you and the staff for your social services creativity and what I think is a role model for not only our community, but also many communities in California and beyond look to Walnut Creek for the creative and responsive ways that seniors receive the social services they do in Walnut Creek. So congratulations for your hardworking and creative staff.
Well, thank you so much. And not to take the credit, it was definitely a team effort, but I will say that we have been looked upon in the state of California multiple times for the Neighbor Express program. That is our volunteer pairing program. It has been launched on a nation, that model has been launched, as well as our templates for programming, volunteer vetting, how we communicate with staff. They're all templates that have been integrated into that volunteer database, and is, I not so much anymore, but I was getting calls almost weekly being like, hey, can you tell us how you're doing it? We want to do what Walnut Creek does. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if the city here had not have been supportive of investigating this new venture without it. So again, thank you back to you for being allowing me to be able to try it.
All right, great. Okay, we're going to move on to commission announcements or brief reports on activities. Any commissioners have comments they'd like to make? Mr. Kearsley.
So I just like to make a brief comment, and it kind of goes back to my observations on spending a significant amount of time in the open space these many months. And it's been very encouraging to see families and so many people out on the trails that, again, being a longtime community member that's been on these trails, I hadn't seen before. And many times it's families with young children that probably are reluctant to be out there. But for several of them, I get the impression that not only is it the first time they've utilized the open space, they also don't know that it's actually Walnut Creek property. So it's again, very encouraging, all that. Now, that being said, like everything with the open space, there's a certain responsibility that comes with that. And part of that responsibility goes to what I mentioned about staying on the marked trails. I think that's extremely important. And as Mike mentioned about the erosion and the impact that goes beyond just the trail itself, I think that's so important. Also, cleaning up after pets. I've noticed on several occasions where open space users have their pets off leash, and often they're well in front of them, which is fine. They can do that in certain areas. But the problem is they may not see what the pet is doing. And so I like to think that most of the folks that have their pets, if they saw something, they'd clean it up. But in many instances, when a dog is 20, 30 yards ahead or further, it's hard to know what they're doing. And so I just encourage that users that have dogs clean up after them and make sure they follow them to see where they've been. And lastly, where it is appropriate to wear masks. I mean, we all struggle with that, and think in the open space it would be more room and everything, but there are many junctures where there are narrow passings and things, and it just makes it certainly a little more awkward when some people have masks and some people don't, and for the most part people are abiding by that. But just as a reminder, I'd like to make sure that, again, when it is appropriate, that people wear masks out there. That's it.
Very good, thank you. I'm gonna use that as a forward on my report, which is for representing the commission to the Open Space Foundation. The Open Space Foundation resumed meetings a couple of months ago outdoors in a big circle with social distancing and masking and all the appropriate precautions. The last two meetings, much of the agenda has talked about many of the things you talked about, and they are now gearing up for a series of volunteer activities to bring families to the open space to help out, since there's no community service day other than the food bank. They want to get people that have the energy for the open space, because they've now discovered it, to get out there and do some positive things for the open space, and at the same time educate them about any number of things, the wildlife, why it's important to stay on the trails, the history, things like that, things that are obvious. They're looking for people to get involved as instructors and team leaders, since this is an outdoor activity, we're going to try to do family pods and things like that that are appropriately safe and within guidelines. And the planning will also reach out to public works staff to coordinate projects that need to be done as well. So this is just getting kicked off, the planning efforts, and communication and public announcements regarding this and everything else is being organized. So I encourage any one of you and anyone that's listening online in any way to get involved with the open space as they try to gear up volunteer groups to help out beginning later this fall. Any other commissioner reports? Okay, then it's time to move into staff announcements or brief reports on activities.
I guess I'll go. Good evening, Commissioners. Karen Houston Martin, Recreation Manager for Aquatics Special Events Tennis. I just am on here to give you a quick update. As Kevin mentioned, that Aquatics is currently open. We are taking lap swim reservations at both Clark and Larkey Swim Center. We just opened Larkey today to take lap swimming. We've been running rentals there as far as swim team rentals, and now we are doing lap swim there as well, and we'll continue lap swim through September 25th. Also wanted to give a quick update that we have started taking boot camp permits. So we are starting to permit small fitness groups out in our parks as well. We are piloting through our Perfect Mind program software. We are going to be piloting some reservation cancellations for our department to make sure that we can do that. So as we move forward with our reduced staffing, we're able to hone in on efficiencies and give our community the ability to make cancellations online and then alert waitlist participants so they can quickly get online and book for their services that they desire. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Jim, are you going to give a report?
Kevin, do you know if Jim Carlson was going to make a report?
I don't. I'd say Art, move on. If Jim can join us later, we will invite Jim to return.
Well, later is now.
Then I will jump in. And Heather, I wasn't sure if you wanted to remind the chair and the vice chair about Friday's mayor's breakfast, virtual breakfast.
Thank you. I think you just did.
I don't want to steal your bacon.
Thank you. We had, at least Brendan and myself had received an email or a reach out. So I'll forward the email to Vice Chair Davenport. It's for Friday, 7 a.m. Zoom. But we don't have the details yet.
I think it might be 9 a.m.
I think it's 9.
Good.
Yeah.
You're welcome to come early for the breakfast.
Very good.
Jim, were you able to jump in? Sorry, Art, Sergio.
I just confirmed on my calendar it's 9 a.m.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see anyone else looking to make a report. So unless there are any final comments, which I don't see any. So we will go ahead and adjourn this meeting of the pros, and we will meet again, hopefully, on October 5th. So thank you all, and thank you anyone that was watching tonight.